Hey everyone, and thank you for joining me for today's live reading of Fear Inc., Volume 3 by Melinda Valentine, and this is presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Prologue, 6 years ago. Krysta rolled over onto her side, resting her head on her perched hand to get a better view of Kasper as he stood by the cliff's edge overlooking their little town. He was gorgeous. The moonlight caressed his bare shoulders and back from this angle. The soft breeze tousled his hair. It was longer than it was when they started seeing each other 6 months ago. Now it would actually stay behind his ear and curl around the lobe when he pushed it there. She never tired of looking at him. She knew if he'd asked her, she would gladly look her fill for the rest of her life. She sat up, rummaging around their blankets for her clothes. She stood up, slipping her feet into her panties before pulling her jeans on. Once her bra and shirt were back on, she wrapped her arms around him from behind. He crossed his arms around hers, holding her to him. Hey there, kitten. It's getting late. As much as I don't want to, I better get you home. He turned to face her, a big, goofy smile on his lips. Krysta stretched up on her tiptoes, pressing a kiss to them. It was soft and sweet. Nothing like the heated, wet kisses of earlier, yet no less mesmerizing. You're so unbelievably beautiful. He pressed his lips to hers again. Kissing Kasper had been a fantasy for longer than she cared to admit, even to herself. Now she could indulge whenever her heart desired. Well, not really. They were still hiding their relationship from everyone. That was why she needed to woman up. They wouldn't be able to hide much longer. She'd been nervous all night. She had to tell him. This moment, in their place, was perfect. Before we go, I have something to tell you. You can tell me anything, he grinned down at her, clasping his hands at the small of her back. What dirty little fantasy are you cooking up now? I wouldn't call it a dirty fantasy. Perhaps scandalous. She sucked in a large breath, slowly blowing it out. I'm pregnant. She smiled up at him. There, she said it. Now it suddenly felt real, as if sharing the news with him made it real and not just a notion. She had loved Kasper for so long. Even though she wasn't ready now, she would get there. She had 7 months to prepare. There wasn't anyone else she would want to do this with. Kasper was it for her. She knew it like she knew her own name. The smile she so dearly loved slowly slipped from his face. Are you playing with me? Of course not. Who would do such a thing? You're pregnant? Yes. She couldn't understand why he was looking at her that way. He let go of her and took a step back. Is it mine? Is it? She felt as though he'd smacked her in the face. It would have hurt a lot less if he had. You're the only one I've ever been with, and you fucking know it, Cass. He ran his fingers through his hair, refusing to make eye contact. She touched his arm, only to have him pull away. She understood it was probably a shock. Hell, it was for her too when she found out. When the package says 99% effective, you never think you'll be the 1%. Lucky her. Kasper pulled his shirt back on, then picked up their blanket. Kasper, talk to me, she pleaded. If we don't leave now, you'll miss curfew. He left her standing there alone as he started down the footpath. Krysta could either follow or get left out here. She scurried after him. She could hear his Harley roar to life before she even cleared the tree line. His head was lowered as he held out her helmet. She slipped it on her head before swinging her leg over the bike. At least he waited for her to wrap her arms around him before he took off. The ride back to town was tense. He didn't squeeze her hands or reach back to rub her thigh while he drove like he usually did. Krysta couldn't help the sinking feeling in her stomach, the one saying that this was the last ride she would take with her arms wrapped around the man she desperately loved. Kasper stopped his bike at the end of her street, like always. Kasper thought it would be better to see how things went before they broke the news to Paxton. He didn't want to lose his best friend, and Krysta didn't want her brother to worry if it ended up being just a fling. For her, it wasn't a fling. Every molecule of her being was madly in love for Guttenmuth. She couldn't bring herself to get off the bike. Now that she thought about it, it would be the last time she'd ride behind him, holding him tight. No matter what happened between them, it wasn't safe for her. She couldn't risk anything happening to the baby now. He felt stiff under her arms, his hands remaining on the handlebars. Slowly, she dismounted. "Kasper," she whispered. "I'm sorry I said that. I know you haven't been with anyone else." Relief flooded through her. Maybe he just needed some time. It took her a whole week to tell him. "Don't worry, I'll pay for it," he said while tucking her helmet into his saddlebag. "Pay for what?" "The abortion. It's my responsibility." For the second time tonight, Krysta felt her world tip. Abortion? How could he even suggest that? She'd mentioned a few times in the last 6 months alone her feelings on that topic. She was pro-choice, but her choice was no. She would rather raise this baby on her own. She really hoped she wouldn't have to. She straightened her shoulders, holding her head high. "I'm not doing that. I'm having this baby." Damn it, Krysta. This wasn't supposed to happen. Maybe we didn't plan it, but it did happen. I'm not the fathering type. So you are. I can't be someone's father, Krysta. Not now. Maybe not ever. Krysta felt her heart splintering into a million pieces. She pressed her shaking hands to her stomach as nausea rolled through her. She wasn't sure if it was from the realization that she was going to be raising this baby on her own after all, or if morning sickness was once again rearing its ugly head. Unable to breathe through it, she turned quickly to the hedges behind her to vomit. "Are you going to be okay to walk home?" The burning in her throat lit a fuse to ignite a fire in her belly. He didn't get to see her vulnerable ever again. Her father's words echoed in her ear. "A man worthy of your love, baby girl, will always show you what you mean to him. Don't listen for flowery words. He may not know how to speak to them, but he will always show you if you're paying attention." Straightening, she wiped her mouth on the sleeve of her sweatshirt. Kasper still straddled his bike. She'd hoped she would see regret or pain in his eyes, something to show her what he felt for her. Nothing. That's what she saw, looking back at her. A blank mask devoid of any emotion, good, bad, or indifferent. This was it. It was time for her to walk away. Time to go back to pretending she wasn't in love with the man before her. She'd had to do just that for years. She could do it again. Fake it till you make it, they say. "You don't need to worry about me anymore, Kasper." Without waiting for him to reply, she started walking down the dark street to her house, alone. Chapter 1. Krysta. Present day. Krysta gripped her Ruger with shaky hands. Creeping through the back door, she moved quickly but quietly past the kitchen and living room. She found the staircase going upstairs, one foot in front of the other, as close to the wall as she could to get to lessen the chance of a creaky floorboard. She ascended to the upper floor. She could hear voices but couldn't make out the words. The door was open at the end of the hall. A soft glow beckoned her. She switched the gun to the other hand, wiping her sweaty hand down her jeans before adjusting her right-handed grip yet again. Moving down the hallway, Krysta clicked the safety off. Without hesitation, she rushed into the room, only to find she was too late. Corey lay lifeless in a pool of her own blood, unseeing eyes staring up at the ceiling. Paxton was tied to a chair to her right. The anguish in his eyes almost brought her to her knees. The man standing behind them drew his knife high above his head before plunging it into her brother's chest. Krysta woke up screaming, her body slick with sweat. She brushed her wet, matted hair from her face with the crook of her arm, her dreams slowly fading as she reacquainted herself with her surroundings. She lifted herself onto her elbows, letting her eyes adjust to the dark. Bentley lay sound asleep next to her, a sleep mask covering his eyes and plugs filling his ears. He'd stopped waking up with her after the first few weeks of her reoccurring nightmares. He said he needed his rest. Like she didn't. They were frequent still after all of these months. Sometimes they played out like a memory. Other nights, like tonight, she was too late, her mind playing out what might have been. Taking a deep breath, she gave in. There was no sense lying there wide awake. There would be no more sleep tonight. Slithering out of bed, she snatched Bentley's button-down shirt off the edge of the mattress. Slipping it on her shoulders, she continued fastening the buttons on the way to the kitchen. Her hands shook slightly as she poured herself a glass of orange juice. The light from the open fridge cast shadows throughout the room. She was sick and tired of the dreams that haunted her. They replayed the image of her taking another man's life, repeatedly. She knew without a doubt, given the same situation, she would have done it all over again. She'd saved Corey's life and her brother's. That man wouldn't have stopped once he'd killed Corey. He would have had no choice except to silence Paxton, too. Corey had moved in next door to her brother a few months earlier. Sparks flew immediately between the two of them. They were perfect for each other. Her stubborn-ass brother almost screwed it all up. Thankfully, he came to his senses, and now Corey was living with him. She was incredibly happy for them both. She wanted to call her big brother, but it was the middle of the night. She didn't want to wake him or Corey. He worried about her enough as it was. She carried her juice and banana to the kitchen table and sat down. Opening her laptop, she continued to work on a project she was already 2 weeks ahead of schedule on. At this rate, she would be done in a day or two. The client would certainly be happy. She loved her job as a freelance graphic designer. She was able to take on as many jobs and clients as she wished and work as many hours as she wanted as long as she finished by the deadline. Plus, she could work from anywhere in the world that had a Wi-Fi connection. If she wanted to work on a beach in Maui, there was nothing stopping her. She was contemplating laying back down for a few hours when Bentley waltzed into the kitchen. He'd showered and was dressed in a black designer suit. A white shirt and a navy tie completed the look. He was a good-looking man. He had a toned, lean body, but not bulging with muscles. He had a stunning smile and was super smart. His father was a well-known politician. Although he hadn't come right out and said anything, Krysta knew he had similar aspirations in the future. She liked spending time with him. He treated her nice, and they never fought. At least, they hadn't in the past. Since the night she saved Corey's life, things had been different. They still didn't fight, but that was probably because Bentley refused to continue what he thought was an unpleasant conversation. If she pushed, he simply left the room. After a few months, they were already living in a routine. They never did anything spontaneous. The only time he surprised her were client dinners he would spring on her at the last minute. Then again, there was that time he proposed to her. Then he did it again for the second time. The first time was just before the shooting. She never gave him an answer. She had no idea what she wanted to do. He was a wonderful man, but was he right for her? She didn't get butterflies in her stomach when he kissed her. She didn't smile at the sight of his name on her phone. She had been in love before, that crazy kind of love. The kind that makes you feel like you could fly. The kind that makes you believe the entire world is yours for the taking. She wanted every moment of every day with him. The only problem with crazy love was what happened when it ended. Or in her case, it didn't end. It was years ago, yet the wound reopened whenever she pictured his stubbled face. She would love him until the day she died. She knew that with every stuttered beat of her damaged heart. Sadly, she also knew he would never change. No matter how hard she loved him, she would never be enough. He wasn't the type of man to settle down. Fucking Peter Pan syndrome. Internally, she rolled her eyes. She wanted the opposite. She wanted to settle down. That's what she wanted more than anything. She was ready for a family. After she returned from her month stay at Paxton's house, she came back even more determined to settle down. She knew Bentley would be a stable and committed husband, so what if things were only lukewarm with him? That could change. Not everyone got the fairy tale love story. She'd said yes, ignoring the feeling in her gut. She hadn't yet told Paxton, and she knew he would be even less than thrilled. He wasn't a fan of her new fiancé, even though they had never met in person. Another red flag. She'd never properly introduced him to her ragtag family. He glanced over his shoulder at her before pouring his coffee. You look exhausted, Chris. How long have you been up this time? A few hours, she shrugged. You need to see a doctor. You can't keep going on like this. It's disruptive. He leaned against the kitchen counter. He sipped at the hot liquid in his mug. I've already been to see a doctor, remember? Setting the mug down, he crossed his arms over his chest. Perhaps you should see a different one then. Someone who will prescribe you something to sleep, at least. She rolled her eyes. She hated when he talked to her like she needed to be told what to do. She was a grown-ass woman, and if she wanted a man to boss her around, she would ask her brother his opinion on her life choices. He would happily oblige her. He said, everything I'm experiencing is normal. I don't want to have to take something every night to sleep. She stood up, rounding the table to stand before him. I took a man's life, Bentley. I told you to stop saying that. You make it sound like you murdered someone in cold blood. It was in defense of your friend Tori. Corey. Damn it, Bentley, my friend's name is Corey. How many times have I said that? Whether the circumstances were right or wrong, it doesn't change the outcome. My subconscious is trying to deal with it through my fucking dreams. This is getting nowhere. You obviously aren't going to listen to my advice on this, and you know how I feel when you swear, Chris. We have more pressing matters to go over. I would like to formally announce our engagement at my father's dinner party after Thanksgiving. He pushed away from the counter, taking her arms in each hand. We can discuss it in more detail later. I need to get going before I'm late to my meeting. He kissed her cheek, exiting the room before she could respond. She stood there, wondering, yet again, if she'd made the right decision in saying that she would marry him. Then she remembered the pain she felt all those years ago, the pain of losing a love like no other, and it fortified her choice. He wouldn't hurt her that way. Her heart would be safe at least. She needed to tell Paxton before it was on the front page of the society section of the paper. Not something she was looking forward to, but it was necessary. Krysta figured no time like the present. She hustled to the bedroom. She needed a shower, and then she'd head to Bush Castle to have lunch with her big brother. She showered quickly, then grabbed a pair of jeans and a t-shirt from the drawer containing her things. She'd moved in a few weeks ago, but decided to keep it quiet for now. Bentley worried it would look scandalous before the engagement was announced. People lived together before marrying all the time. She didn't see the big deal. He was afraid it would make the family look bad. Wait until his family got a good look at her tattoo-covered ex-cop, now private investigator brother and the rest of the gang she considered family. She giggled to herself. That was going to be fun. Krysta turned down Paxton Street 90 minutes after leaving the house. His truck wasn't in the driveway, so she kept on going. He must be at the office. The 10-mile drive to Fear Incorporated went by in a haze of classic rock booming through her speakers. Her brother retired from the police force a few years ago. Krysta didn't know everything about what happened to make him leave, but she knew enough to know his mental well-being couldn't take it anymore. One of his best friends started a private investigating firm, and he was the first to jump aboard. But between the new job at Fear Incorporated and his life with Corey, Krysta couldn't remember a time her brother was as happy as he was now. She parked next to Paxton's truck and groaned as she walked past Kasper's motorcycle. Great, she mumbled. She loved the guys. She really did. Kasper, however, knew every single button to push to make her lose her shit. All her shit. She was not in the mood to deal with him today. There was too much history there. The bell above the door jingled as she entered the building. An adorable Mia waddled out from the back room. She wore a pink, frilly dress that bounced around her as she ran toward Krysta scooped the little angel up in her arms and spun her around. She kissed Mia's forehead, breathing in the scent of baby shampoo. Hey there, pretty girl. She loved being around the kids. They brought so much life and innocence into a gloomy world. Sometimes she wondered what kind of mother she would have been. She shook that thought away as quickly as it came. She didn't need to go down this road. Someday she'd have kids of her own. Her time hadn't run out yet, not even close. She had plenty of it. Putting Mia back down, she looked around the room. Where's your mama? The little girl cooed in response as she ran into the back. Sloane was nowhere in sight, but she was here looking for her brother anyway. He was sitting at his desk talking animatedly. Where there's one, the other isn't usually far. So, of course, Kasper was sitting right next to him. His blue eyes bored into her from across the room. Like storm clouds rolling in, they were both beautiful and dangerous. Today, his chin-length locks were piled on his head in a messy man bun. She never understood his need to wear it that way. If it were up to her, she'd rip it out and suspend his hair tie privileges. She mentally rolled her eyes. Anything having to do with this man was definitely not her concern. Dread and butterflies fought for control of her belly as she squared for marching.